And people are already starting to mobilize and to march and to organize, not just to win an election this year, but to push forward the priorities of our party and I think our Commonwealth and our country. The fact that you're here on a Monday, a rainy Monday in August, means that you're ready to win. So I just have one question for this crowd to start. Are you ready to win an election day?
Yeah.
Every generation is apparently ready to win. But I want to say a couple things. Number one, I do want to say thanks in a very personal way. I can literally say this. In my first campaign for state office a couple years ago, it started literally in this building. It was just fortuitous that we're in this building, number one. Number two is, and more importantly, of the location. What's more important, though, is the commitment that you made to me over these many years. I could not be a public official, having run all those years ago and many times since, if it were not for your help, if it were not for the sacrifices your families have made for me, and some of those sacrifices and degrees of support go back generations for my family, 2 or 3 generations, literally. My grandfather, Mark, ran for district attorney in 1941 in a primary, didn't make it. And so all those years ago, we were battling together. So I'm grateful that you're willing to help us, but I'm also grateful, I guess in a larger sense, because you're here not because you had nothing else to do on a rainy Monday in August, not because you don't have other commitments of your time and your family's time. You're here because you love your country. And our country is not on the right track right now, and that's about as vast an understatement as I could ever make. But we have a chance this year to just begin. Winning this year isn't the end of the corrective action we have to take. Winning this year puts us on the right track. And it's going to take a lot of work between now and Election Day. Basically, 80 some days, 12 weeks between now and Election Day. It's going to take a lot of work to get there and to win. But I want to talk maybe about 2 or 3 issues. Number one is, when you consider what we're doing this year, it's really a battle for the middle class, those trying to get to the middle class, and American workers. All 3 of those groups, and some of them overlap obviously, are at the core of our basic values as Democrats, frankly, values as Pennsylvanians and as Americans. And I think there are many battles we could talk about within that fight for the middle class. Let me just mention a few. First of all, the battle on health care. Mark referred to that earlier. Who would ever believe that after all the battles that led up to the passage in 2010 of the Affordable Care Act, not just months and years, but literally decades, whether you started Teddy Roosevelt or Harry Truman or any president after that, so many presidents trying to get to a place where we could insure that many people. We finally got there in 2010, and after that, within a few years, 20 million people got health care. In this state alone, 1.1 million people got health care because of the work that you all did, supporting candidates and leading that effort to pass the Affordable Care Act. And most of those in Pennsylvania, about more than 60% of the 1.1 million, over 700,000, got their health care through Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion just so happened to come along when the opioid crisis really became an epidemic. That is the only way that some Pennsylvanians, some residents of Lackawanna County or northeastern Pennsylvania will get their help. The only way they can get the help is because they have Medicaid expansion. So all of that effort, all of those battles, all of those obstacles to surmount, and here we are. Not only were they trying to decimate Medicaid last year, the Republicans, who have had control for 4 years of the United States Congress, now they have a president who works with them on repealing the Affordable Care Act, decimating Medicaid, and sabotaging the health insurance markets. All 3 are true. They did all 3 last year. But I thought that's probably the end of what they would do for now. That they would keep pushing on those 3, and that would be bad enough. They weren't done. They are now literally attorneys general who happen to be Republicans around the country, and the Republican Party is in court right now. And this is the official Republican Party position, trying to take away the protections for pre-existing conditions, calling that part of the law unconstitutional. If there was ever a fight that we have to fight to the end of the earth, it is that one. We are not going to allow them to take away protections for pre-existing conditions. And if they want this whole campaign, my campaign and every other campaign, to come down to one issue, I'll fight that battle. We're going to win that battle. We're going to stop them from doing it. That's what we're going to do. I brought with me a piece of paper which unfortunately tells a very sad story when it comes to health care and what Republican priorities are. This is the front page of a report, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Thank God we have groups like this that track spending and policy. This is dated June 28th. On one piece of paper are all of the priorities of the Republican Party in terms of who they're for and whose programs they want to cut. The headline is, House GOP budget retains tax cuts for wealthy, proposes deep program cuts for millions of Americans. This summarizes the $5 trillion in cuts they want to make over the next decade into programs we care about. Let's start with health care. $2.1 trillion of the $5 trillion are in health care. That's $1.5 trillion to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, $1.5 trillion just to those two, and then Medicare, $530 billion in Medicare costs. Now, my opponent voted for this budget. It was voted on June 21st. This isn't some theory. This isn't some, if we could get power, we will do this. This is the Republican budget. They want to cut $5 trillion from programs we care about. So it's $2 trillion on health care, almost $1 trillion, over $900 billion in cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, Social Security income for low-income folks and folks who might happen to be blind or have a disability, and the TANF program, which helps a lot of families that are trying to get back up on their feet. Then there's another cut that would cut Pell Grants and would also cut the social services block grants. So on one piece of paper, you know exactly what the Republican Party stands for. Here it is. This is their, in a sense, their manifesto. This is why they wanted power. Because for years we heard from people saying, well, if they get total power and the right is really in control, they'll start cutting these programs. And a lot of other people said, oh, no, they won't. They won't go that far. They won't go that far. They won't actually vote for that or have a president sign into law what they would seek to cut. But this is what we're talking about. And if there was ever a time to fight hard as a Democrat, it's this. We have to stop these cuts. And they're going to try and try again to cut health care, to cut the nutrition programs, to cut programs that help folks who are low income, folks who have a disability, folks who have a vulnerability of some kind, folks that we should lift up. They really don't believe. Republicans really don't believe in Washington. Maybe some here in Lackawanna County. I'll give them a little bit of running room for now. But Republicans in Washington really don't believe that the greatest country in the world, the most powerful military in the world, that same country can be a generous country, can give people health care, can help people when they're down, can help people when they're out of work and might need a nutrition program. They don't believe that. And I know some people say, oh, come on now. You're really kind of going pretty far. What I just said might not have been true 20 years ago when we had moderate Republicans in Washington, maybe even some conservatives. They're all gone. Think about it. Think about the people who were elected governor of Pennsylvania or United States Senator from Pennsylvania just in my lifetime. A couple of decades, as you know. But just think about those Republicans. They couldn't be nominated today. They would all lose because they're not hard right. They're not hard right enough. Just go and ask. Ask a federal judge in any part of America who is a conservative federal judge. Ask them if they're on that list of 25 to get on the Supreme Court. 25 names. 25 names, and we have hundreds of federal judges. Only 25 can be on the list, and only 25 can be on the court. So now what do we have? We got the first name on the list, right? Gorsuch. He's on the court because he was on the list, picked by the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. Heritage calls unions cartels. That's the same group that is picking the United States Supreme Court. That's the same group, Heritage, which would love this piece of paper. They would love to see this not just passed by the House, but passed by the Senate and enacted into law. $5 trillion in cuts. That's what this party stands for. So there is no ambiguity now what this party stands for. We have to beat them in the election to stop them from doing that, because if we don't, if they have power, continuing power, they're gonna put these cuts into place. And I'll be damned if I'm going to allow that to happen in the United States Senate, in the United States of America. We are not going to allow that to happen. So we got a big fight on health care. Let me get to two more quickly. Jobs and wages. Got to be honest with you. Our party hasn't talked about either of those two words nearly enough. We have to get back to the fundamentals, talking about creating jobs and lifting wages. And we got to do more than just say we're for the increase in the minimum wage. Of course we are, but we got to talk about it more. But you also have to have a game plan to lift wages. One way to lift wages is to say to that tax bill the Republicans rammed down our throats last November and December, that tax bill didn't do for the middle class what it could have done. Instead of saying to the top 1%, those, if you're in the room, sorry, if you're making $750,000 or $1 million or up a year, put your hand up. Because on average, if you're in the top 1%, you got a $51,000 tax cut just this year. And then you're going to get another number like that the year after that and the year after that. We don't believe that people in the top 1% are the ones who need the help. The middle class hasn't had much of a wage increase in years, some cases in decades. Why don't we take that tax cut for the top 1%, which is costing the United States of America this year $58 billion. That's what the top 1% is getting, $58 billion just this year. Why don't we take that $58 billion and apply most of it to a middle class tax cut and to lift people up if you can't get them a wage increase that quickly? Why don't we do that? Why don't we propose that as a party? We should. So we've got to be the party about lifting wages for once, and not just the party that talks about 300 other issues. Third issue, workers and unions. Our ability to protect those, go ahead. Who's a member of a union? Put your hand up, thank you. We don't talk about workers and unions, and you know what the Republican Party is doing? Not the old Republican Party, not the Republican Party that hung around with the Chamber of Commerce. They're all gone. That country club Republican, they're gone. They're not hard right. You got to be hard right economically, social right. You got to buy the whole package to get on the list. But you know what that old Republican Party used to do? They would say, well, look, I may be for some unions, but not all unions. So they would make a deal with some unions. That happened, right? That's all gone now. They're all on the same page now. They were all pushing this Janus case, which hit government workers, AFSCME, and groups like organizations like that. The fair share fee, that's all gone now. But they're coming for all of them. They're coming for AFSCME. They're coming for the teachers. They're coming for SEIU. They're coming for the building trades. Some building trades, I think, are understanding that now better. They're coming for all the unions because the Republican Party nationally doesn't believe in unions. They literally don't believe in them. Otherwise, why would they stand at attention every time the Heritage Foundation sends out an alert? When the Heritage Foundation sends out an alert in Washington, you can feel people standing up and saluting. They salute to the Heritage Foundation. They don't really care about unions at all. So they're going to come after unions year after year after year till they can knock their legs out from under them. The only thing standing between that union and those people in the Republican Party that want to take it away is our party. We have to fight for and defend the right to organize, the right to bargain collectively. I can't believe we even have to talk about this. We thought this was settled in the years when we had the Latimer Massacre in Luzerne County, or we had the Homestead Strike in Pittsburgh, outside of Pittsburgh years ago in the early part of the last century. We thought all these battles were settled, but just like we found out on pre-existing conditions, they're not settled. We have to keep fighting these battles because this party is a corrupt, hard-right party, and we have to defeat them. So on unions, we got a long way to go. We've got a long fight ahead of us because they are trying to cripple unions right now as we speak. And the Janus case is just the opening argument. They're going to come at unions morning, noon, and night. But you know what? Whether it's on health care, whether it's on jobs and wages, or whether it's on our workers and unions. You know what our party's best? We're at our best as Democrats and as Americans. We fight for one word, justice. Martin Luther King said 50 years ago this year, he gave a long sermon and he talked about hoping that at the end of his life, someone would accuse him of being what he called an not about his Nobel Peace Prize or all the great awards he got. He was hoping that someone would actually say that he was a drum major for justice. He said, please say that I was a drum major for righteousness. Please say that I was a drum major for peace. Let's just focus on the first one. A drum major for justice. If we are at our best as a party, we are drum majors for justice, fighting these battles for people that don't have a voice, fighting for workers to organize, fighting for health care, fighting for a fair wage. That's what we're at our best. And you know what? St. Augustine said it as well as anyone. Hundreds of years ago, St. Augustine said, without justice, what are kingdoms but great bands of robbers? We have robbers in Washington right now. There is no other word for it. They are trying to rob people that have the protections right now for pre-existing conditions. They're trying to rob that from them. They're trying to rob health care from kids with disabilities on Medicaid, kids in poor rural towns in Pennsylvania, in addition to big cities, and they're trying to rob seniors of their long-term care and nursing homes. All three of those priorities, all three of those Americans are benefited by the Medicaid program. They're also trying to rob people of their Medicare and their Social Security that are earned benefits. That's what they're trying to rob them of. So if they want to be in the business of robbing, we're going to be in the business of stopping that robbery. That's who Democrats are. That's what we're going to do this year, and next year, and 10 years from now if necessary, and we're going to win. Thank you.